right. I am so thankful to be here today with you, and I have been asked to talk about exploring the benefits of beginning your own resource center, your own resource program. I currently teach in Cleveland, Tennessee, and this is the second resource program that the Lord has allowed me to start. I started one in Virginia, and I think the thing that's the most interesting to me is that different states do different things. You know, you think special education, it's just all going to be the same, but it's not. So in the state of Tennessee, we are privileged that the county will work very closely with us. We have occupational therapists, physical therapists, and speech therapists that come into our program and work with our students several different times a week. So that is purely God's goodness. In Virginia, we were only allowed to have speech therapy come in, and that's all the county provided. If a student needed other therapies, that was on the parents. So get to know your team members and what they are able to do, you know, with your school, and then build those relationships. I cannot stress the importance of you reaching out to your county team members, those players, and building those relationships. In Tennessee, we are privileged to have what we call a public to private liaison. And she coordinates so many things that it was up to me to do in Virginia. And so that has given me back some time, and I'm very thankful for that. We also have 3 different workers that come in, are self-professed Christians, and they are so thankful to see a Christian school that's reaching out and working with these students. So I'm going to probably echo so much of what you've already heard this morning. And I think probably that is the Lord's plan. We just need to hear it, we need to review it, and then we need to live it at all of the different ministries where we are. So my background, I was a secondary education major. My specials were English and music. I taught for 6 years, went back and got a counseling certification. And then we were not able to have children, and so we adopted our daughter through the social services, and found out pretty quickly that she had some special needs. And so our school was not able to help. They didn't know how. And we had very well-meaning people who gave some pretty not great advice, but they really meant well, you know. I can remember one deacon walked up to my husband and said, "Hey, you know, I could probably teach you how to spank your kid, and that would probably solve the problem." And I thought, wow, you know, that's a lot, you know, that, and to think as a parent, you know, yes, a lot of things can be solved through proper discipline, but there are just some things that's not really what's going on. And so I made the decision. I was actually in one of Lisa Joyner's workshops, and the Lord had spoken to my heart about going back to get a degree in special education for my daughter. But I also knew that there were a lot of other children in our school that were not being served. And I sat there. I told my husband, I think I need to go back and get a degree. And he said, okay, let's not tell anybody yet. Let's just pray about it. So at this time, my dad was actually my administrator, and we loved working together. But I went to another session, came back, sat in one of Lisa's sessions, and he was sitting in there, which was kind of odd. You know, I didn't expect him to be in there. And he looked at me and he said, "Where were you?" I said, "I can go to whatever session I want." You know, I wasn't assigned a session. And he said, "You need to go back and get your degree in special education, and our school's going to pay for it." I mean, that was a really fast answer to prayer, like within an hour or two. So I'm very thankful for that. Very thankful for Dr. Joyner, for Dr. McCormick, who worked at Hidden Treasure for a long time, being an administrator there, and they both helped to shape what we're doing at our school. So my job today is just to kind of show you what we're doing, but how you can do it in your own school. You don't have to be big. You don't have to have a lot of people. You don't have to do tons of paperwork, and all of that's great, but we need to help, okay? So that's kind of where we're going to start with this. So what is our mission? And this is kind of the driving force behind why I'm doing what I'm doing, okay? My mission is to educate all of the students in our school. We can't have some kids that just fall between the cracks. We can't have some kids that we just keep pushing on, and we know they're not learning. So we have to reach everybody. We also have to show God's grace and glory. I remember sitting in a meeting for a child right when I first started the first program, and one of our teachers had a reputation in the community for being, maybe hard-nosed is a good word. Does that sound good? Hard-nosed. And one of the director of special education for our county happened to be in that meeting, and she said, "Are you a Christian?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Don't you teach that God gives second chances?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Well, then why doesn't your teacher?" That really felt like a slap across the face. Why don't our teachers? Why are we not doing the response to intervention? And we need to be. So our staff, our students, we should show God's grace and glory. I will ask my kids in gen ed classes and sped classes, "Why are we here?" And they'll look at me and they'll say, "To glorify God," because that's what I tell them all the time. So as teachers, are we glorifying God through how we interact with our students? And then, does the Great Commission actually call us to reach all people, or are we only called to reach the people who fit into the boxes and to fit into our perceptions of what a child sitting in a Christian school should look like and act like? Often those are very different things. And so I believe that we are called to actually serve all students, to reach all people with the gospel. I can't expect parents to drop off 2 of their children at my Christian school and drive the 3rd to public school because I can't help them. And too often from parents, that's what we hear. I've even talked to parents who have heard, I've heard personally that child as they're driving away is crying because why can't they go to the school where they teach them about God? I don't want that to be my school. And so we're working very hard to make that a reality. All right, so here's the challenge to begin. How do we accept those different or those struggling students? Do we like all the struggling students sit there and all the rest of the students sit here? Or are we integrating? Are we showing the fact that God didn't make a mistake and everybody was created for a purpose? Okay, so this is interesting. We have to see the need first, or we're not going to do anything about it. We have to teach our gen ed students how to interact with our special students, because chances are they're going to have a kid who has some sort of disability or some sort of need, and if they never learn how to interact, what are they going to do as a parent? I was not around children who had special needs as a student. I'm sure we had some in our school, but our school didn't help them when I was growing up. And so when my daughter had special needs, my first reaction is, I have no idea what to do, but I'm going to learn because she was given to me. She is my responsibility. I have to learn how to help her. Now, unfortunately, all parents don't have that philosophy, and sometimes it gets thrown back on the school. You fix them, as if fixing is really what we're after. And more often it's figure it out, how to help them. So are we teaching our gen ed students that these are still children who are created in God's image, and we need to treat them that way? I think all students should be educated through biblical truths. We've got great curriculum out there. Our school uses Abeka, Bob Jones curriculum, other things. We have great curriculum out there. But some of these students that we have to turn away, they don't get that chance to hear all of the different subjects through a biblical worldview lens. So what do we think about? We're like, okay, Krista, we get it. We need to start a program. We get it, okay? What are some things that we need to think about? I think this one really hit me hard as I started working in special education, that when we take away those academic difficulties where they feel like I have this kid, I'm thinking about one in particular, who was a 9th grader last year. And this is my 2nd year. This will be my 3rd year working with him. 2nd year working with him. He was such a different kid. Walking down the hallway, he had confidence, He was holding the door. For all these manners, came that we hadn't seen before. He was the kid who was always beating people up, mad, angry, fighting. But once his academic needs got met, this kid started going to church. He started talking to me about devotions he was having, what he learned in Bible class. And so what I'm seeing is that when we remove that academic barrier, we actually help that child stop that fight or flight response that they live with daily in almost every environment, and then they're able to hear spiritual truth. So that's something that we ought to consider. This is why it's important. We should help the students we've already got. You've heard that today a few times. Don't go looking for students out in your community. They're there, but you've already got them in your schools. If you don't believe me, look up the statistics on how many students have ADHD in your schools. That is a barrier, a big one to education. We should limit those resource class sizes. We can't have a class of 20 kids who need individualized help. It doesn't work that way. And that's why these kids struggle in our gen ed classes. It's one of the main reasons. So you're going to have to limit that. And then success in learning is the goal. They're going to learn. We will teach them. They will learn something, but they may not learn at the same pace as everybody else. And as that special education department leader or teacher, we need to understand that's okay. As long as they're learning, that's okay. Next thought here is that the dignity of every child is important. I don't want to run around telling all my coworkers about this child's IQ, all the disabilities, all the things that are going on in my classroom. I mean, we have funny stories, we share fun things, but their dignity is important. And the moment they feel like you are talking about them behind their back, you have lost that child. So this goes for all students, but especially for our students. All students should make grade level contact. So if they are in my classroom all day long and I am the only person they see, if it's possible, I should get them out. They should go eat lunch with peers. Why is that so important? Well, there are so many social skills to learn that as an adult I can work on, but they've got to practice that. So get them out whenever possible. We do grade level for lunch, for PE if possible, for Bible class, they're for choir, for art, whatever those extra special classes are. And then this is important. Your center will not succeed if you are just this little tiny group of people and you don't get other people to help you. I need my pastor. He's here today somewhere. I need my administrator. For me, I'm lucky. That happens to be my husband, so we work well together. I need my gen ed teachers. I need them on board. And sometimes I have to make a call that they just don't love. And I say, hey, I love you anyway, but we got to do this today, and we'll see if it works, and we'll get back and we'll talk about it. But we have to have a relationship where that's possible. That means they need to know I'm praying for them. I am in their corner. I value them. I value their opinion. But we have to work hard to build those relationships. And then every learning center is going to look different. The Hope Allen Center for Exceptional Children will look different than our Specialized Learning Center, and it'll look different than the one that you've got at your school. It'll look different than Hidden Treasure. It's all different, and that's okay. I mean, it kind of carries, just like a Christian school, that burden of whoever's leading, and that's great. But the end goal should be the same, that we are educating these children in biblical truth, and they know how important they are to God. Salvation, that's important. We're trying to get that across to them and their families. And then this one is one we see all the time. If a child feels respected and loved, they're going to work their best to be their best. And their best is different. Everybody's best is different. But if I know that somebody loves me, that they support me, that they are behind what I'm doing, I'm going to try a little harder, and you will too. So we want that for our students. All right, so what kinds of levels of support could your school offer? We've heard about some of these already today. You could do self-contained classes where those kids stay in that room all day long. That's needed. You could do a full-time resource for some of those major academic classes. We do a lot of this where if they're really behind in math, they come to me for math, and they come at the same time that their math class is being taught, so they're not missing history for math. That means I have to coordinate with a lot of schedules because our middle school, high school runs on this schedule, our elementary and preschool run on that schedule, and sometimes I have to get a gen ed teacher to change their schedule for me so that we can get everybody in, and they are very willing to do that. I am blessed with a very good staff. Sometimes they're just part-time. Like I have a kid who just comes over just for reading or just for math, and everything else they can stay in their gen ed courses for. Sometimes I just need to make a change in the classroom. Sometimes it's actually changing, like maybe it's a science class and they can't learn 55 terms. They need to learn 15 terms. And so we can make that change. They can stay in that class. They can learn all that that teacher has to offer and hear all the things that their peers are hearing, but I can change how much information they're learning. That would have to be notated, that it's a modification, but we could do that. We could just give accommodations. Maybe the kid needs earplugs. Maybe they need something special at their desk to help with distractions. Maybe, there are things I can do in the classroom where they don't need to be pulled out. I can help them where they are. Sometimes they just need a test in a different spot. Maybe they need read aloud, or maybe they just need not so many distractions. We have been astonished, I say we, meaning my gen ed teachers, at a kid who will make a D or an F, same test, same everything. They come over to the Learning Center and they test and they make a B. Don't tell me it's because they saw that test once, because they didn't see what the right answers were either, okay? And we've even done it just to prove a point, and we'll rewrite the test, and they're still, the grades are worlds apart, but they didn't have everything in that classroom going on. I also have had teachers tell me, my classroom is quiet. Do any children move in your classroom? Does anybody move paper? Does anybody click a pencil? Do you have a fan? Are there lights in your room? I mean, there are just so many things that cause trouble for students. So I'm glad if your classroom is quiet. Sometimes they need to talk, okay, but I'm glad. But that's not really what that environmental change is for, okay? Or you could offer a tutorial study hall. Maybe they just need a mom at school, to check in and be like, you have a test in 3 days, have you studied? No, you don't even know where the book is, go find it, Maybe you need one of those. I have some kids, as long as mom is there in tutorial study hall, their grades are good, they're getting everything done. But once they lose that support, we just see them nosedive, So organization could be an issue, and we teach that. Tutorial study hall teachers are in contact with the gen ed teacher. They know when tests are coming. They get review sheets. They help the kids with their planner, organize their locker, because that is a nightmare in and of itself, all of those things. All right, so why have a self-contained classroom? This has already been talked about, but this would be for those kiddos that they're about 2 or 3 grade levels below peers. And there's just not an easy way for you to work with them in that gen ed classroom. That teacher cannot give that much time. We even socially, we're seeing big gaps, okay? There are some kids who they need this. This is great. We need to offer this, but these kids typically don't get a regular general education diploma. So we know that when they're moving into that, they may be losing some of that, what goes along with the general education degree, diploma. Okay, so how do we do this classroom? Well, you have to set it up differently, and I think you're probably going to delve into this a lot, so I'm not going to stay here. But they're going to need a lot more space. They're going to need calm down spaces. They're going to need sensory spaces. There's a lot more thinking than you would do for a gen ed classroom. You need to get to know your students before they even get to your room. Have parents fill out a form. What are likes? What are dislikes? What are triggers for this child? We could have this ready for parents so that we're not coming in and taking 2.5 weeks to try to know what might be a problem for this child. Set up your classroom with a plan so that there are centers so they can move from thing to thing and they know what to do when that rotation needs to happen. You need to have visuals, multisensory aids in your classroom, because most of these kiddos are going to need that to learn. And then you've got to be organized. If you are not, that very quickly devolves into a nightmare, okay? So organization, and these kids will need this in order to do well. So have a plan, have a schedule. Create a sense of community. Our Learning Center kids are high-fiving each other, as they go in, out, down the hallways. Some of ours are taking sign language courses, and so they're, talking to each other in code. All the other kids don't know the code. So create that sense of community where it is a good thing to be in the Learning Center. I actually have kids who will come, they'll see me come to pick up a kid to take him to a resource class, and they'll say, "Can I go too?" I'm like, "No, but you have fun over there." I'm like, "You have fun too," But make your Learning Center not be the place where like, "Oh, you're stupid. You have to go to the learning." No, this is the place where we do cool stuff in the Learning Center. Of course, it's not all fun and games. I've had kids who have told their parents, "I want to go to the Learning Center because everyone who goes over there makes a 100 on everything." Okay, of course that is not true, but as they walk in and they see all this stuff, like that's the spot to be. Get your routines down, but be flexible. You will have some days that just don't go as planned, and that is totally all right. I did a part of my practicum in a juvenile detention facility, which was an experience in and of itself. It was great, but I remember one day I walked into class, and the English teacher looked at me and she said, "I showed you my lesson plans, but I am changing everything, and if you had seen them in the hallway, you would know why." I said, "Okay," so just be able to be flexible. And then integrate life skill instruction. For these kids in this self-contained environment, they're going to have those skills to survive, but also to be able to just work a job. So incorporate that into what you're doing. All right, so let's get to a resource room, a resource classroom. This purpose is just to give you a separate setting where we can teach the student with disability on a smaller group scale so that it's not, there's 25 kids in my classroom, now I have about 6 or fewer in this classroom. I can give them a lot more attention. It almost feels a little bit more like tutoring because I'm individualizing what I'm doing so much. And remember that the kids who are pulled into this, typically they have an IEP. We call it in Virginia, or Tennessee, we call it an ISP, an individualized student plan. An IEP is a legally binding document. My school doesn't provide that because I'm not a government school. So we have taken what they have in their IEP and redone it, created a new form like Sarah said, and we call ours an ISP. And then most students that come in, they're really just coming because they need that information presented in a different way. And sometimes that means we change the curriculum. Sometimes they can't take so much stuff on a page. It's just visually, it's too much. Or sometimes they need fewer of a problem or whatever. So we're looking at that. I've had kids with a reading disability, and they cannot handle a curriculum that is so heavy on reading. So be able to change that up. We talked about this, distractions in the gen ed classroom, so that just kind of says that again. I got it out of order. But I think it's important to remember that especially as you're introducing new information, they need to be able to focus. And a gen ed classroom is hard for that for these kiddos. So this is another reason why a resource classroom is often a good idea. And then sometimes that resource classroom can just provide a more relaxed atmosphere. If you're talking about a kid who already feels fight or flight all the time, I'm thinking about my daughter. She has auditory processing disorder. So again, those sounds, even though to us are just like minimal, to her are overwhelming. So she has about 3 different kinds of earplugs we use for different kinds of situations. In the classroom, she has an FM hearing system, so they look like hearing aids, but the teacher wears a microphone, and the teacher's voice goes right to her ear, which is great because she's just hearing that. But when we go over to the Learning Center, we have things like bean bags, wobble chairs, different alternative seating things that they can do. And I just kind of watch, we have the blue light filters. I just kind of watch all the children, they come in, they're like, oh, as they get over to me, and then they just all mellow out, And I remember the very first time at the school we're at, an adult walked in with the blue light filters up, and they're like, what did you do to the light in here? It was almost like, what is wrong with this room? And then a child walked in that had a disability in front of them, and he just watched the child be like, he was like, okay, that's what that does. That's why we do those. So it's a different atmosphere. It doesn't mean we don't learn, but it means that it kind of helps them to relax already before the learning starts. Individualized curriculum, but group by ability. So I could have a 4th grader and maybe a 2nd grader in the same class, and that's okay. I don't typically group middle school kids with elementary kids. That can be very socially problematic. But you're grouping by ability and by curriculum level often more than just, this age is always 2nd grade. Again, keep your class size small. Use as much of the general curriculum as you can. The goal for some of these kiddos is to get them back out. If we're doing remediation, we're trying to catch them back up. So I don't want to pull them out of my Abeka curriculum, throw them into something that's not at the same level, and then try to throw them back in gen ed. That's not going to work if that's the goal. But if the goal is I need to pick a different curriculum because they cannot sustain on this curriculum that's gen ed, then that's your goal. So know your student. You can differentiate the assessments as well. Maybe they need to test orally, or maybe they don't do true and false. How many of you hate true and false? Yes, all teachers, okay. We don't do true and false. Maybe there's a map section and they have a visual discrimination problem, and so you label extra things on the map in color to help them. There are things we can do with testing. Use manipulatives for your lessons. If you don't have hands-on tools for these kids, they're probably not going to get it. They're going to be very literal. They need to see it. Abstract concepts are difficult. So as many manipulatives as you can have. And then work on the fundamental skills first. If they can't read, science and history are going to be a nightmare for those students. So I have had a student before that was an English language learner with heavy disabilities coming in, and we and his parents determined this year we're not doing science and history. We're doing extra reading and we're doing extra math to try to catch back up to a more sustainable level of performance so that he doesn't feel so overwhelmed, and then we introduce those courses back in. So again, you want to work with parents on that. It would be I had a situation once, and I was not in charge, okay, but I had a situation once where a teacher with another teacher made a decision that this kid is low in reading. I'm just going to pull her out of my reading group and send her across the hall to your reading group, and they were in different grades. Parents had no idea what was going on. Administration had no idea what was going on, and then the gen ed teacher came to the administrator and said, hey, she still can't read. What are we going to do? He said, I didn't even know there was a problem. Now, how do I call that parent and say, every grade on your report card for the last year has been on a first grade level instead of a second grade level, and we suspect your child has a disability? I mean, we can't hide that from parents, so get parents involved. And then the goal for some of these students, like I said, is to get them back in gen ed. If that's the goal, then we have to make sure that curriculum matches. Sometimes they're coming just for testing, and Sarah's right, you can do that in a tutorial study hall kind of a deal. Sometimes we get to where if your tutorial study hall teacher and your gen ed teacher aren't talking, then I don't know that a test is coming up. That's problematic. You can't come to me the day before with these kids and say, we're going to have a history test tomorrow on chapter 12. They will not be ready. And so as the director, we have this rule: if I don't have that study sheet 3 days in advance, my kid's not taking your test. They will take it when they've had the study sheet for 3 days and we've studied. And that kind of puts it back on the gen ed teacher to get their study sheet out, but it also kind of makes it hard on that gen ed teacher because they're gonna have to wait to grade that test. You know, they're gonna have to grade all the other tests and they're gonna have to go back and grade this test. So they can come for assessments. Many times resource rooms can also support social needs. Our kids struggle socially. They struggle with reading facial expression. They struggle with knowing what's appropriate. I remember just like in the last few weeks of school, a gen ed teacher came to me. She said, I was just joking in class, and somebody said something, and I said, shut the front door. And a kid got up and said, I will, and ran down. I was like, she said, of course, she was like, oh no, I shouldn't have said that because it was so literal. But all the kids in the classroom, now they're making fun of him. And so socially, that teacher unknowingly has just built this social mountain that kid has to try to navigate back over to be accepted. So we don't think about those things. That small group setting of a resource room, things like that can happen, and all of our kiddos giggle, our teachers, you know, whatever, and we're like, oh, we didn't mean that for real, and it can be overcome more easily than it can in a gen ed classroom. And then I've noticed that my kids in resource are much more willing to try to make friends than they are in that gen ed classroom. So I can teach more social skills sometimes in that small group setting, and then they can go practice in the gen ed setting, and that's great. I also have a lot of mentoring going on over there. I have middle school kids, some of them who are not even in the Learning Center, volunteering during their study hall once a week to come over and read with some of the younger kids or help them. And you know, we always try to incorporate a game into what we're doing. But we see that relationship forming between gen ed students and Learning Center students, and it is a good thing. It helps our school. You also get more opportunities to coach the students in a variety of areas. I mean, it could even be like you hand out a snack. What do we do with a napkin? You know, where does the rest of it go? So you're helping teach those skills. I had an elementary teacher come to me and she said, now listen, I went to school to teach elementary math, science, history, Bible. She said, I did not go to school to teach kids how to tie their shoes and wipe their noses. And I thought, you are in the wrong place because this is what we do, you know. So taking the time to teach those skills and then helping your students teach other students. It is such a great feeling to me when I see a skill I have taught one student and they turn around and they say, oh, I know what'll help. And they appear that same skill because they got it and now they can model it. So we want to see that in our students. If you have not seen this on Instagram or Facebook, this is a mom's plea for her little girl. Please include my child. You know, as Christian schools telling students, no, we cannot help. And there are some students that you can't. I don't have toileting facilities at my school, nor someone who's trained with that. If a child's not potty trained, I cannot accept them right now. But there are a lot of kids I can't accept that we haven't been able to accept before. So know your limitations, but understand that our goal is to help. And then those gen ed teachers and the sped teachers, they have to work together. If they're not working together, you're going to have problems. You're going to just be putting fires out everywhere all the time. And that starts with education. It starts from the top down. Your pastor needs to be on board. Your administrator needs to be speaking openly about the importance of working with these families and these students. Your teachers need to know that it's really not an option. This is where we're headed. I remember, it might have been you, Lisa. Somebody told me I was calling in my first year or so with like, this teacher will not get on board. And she said, here's what you do. You just tell them the train's moving. They might be the caboose, but the train is moving. We're going this direction, you know. They can get off the train if they don't want to be on the train, but the train is going. You know, but that can't come from me. to the group. I mean, it can, but it's not going to be as effective as if the leadership's on board. I am blessed. Our pastor has a special needs son, and so I can look at a teacher when they balk a little bit, and I'll say, do you want to go tell our pastor that you're not willing to help this child? No, ma'am. Okay, then we're going to keep moving. So don't be above using, what you've got. So we have to consider each child's IEP or ISP. Every single child is different. I don't care if the label's the same. Every child is so different. And so we really need to make sure that we're looking at that as we make the plan. And then if a student is appropriate to be kept in that gen ed classroom, you're not going to have to make a ton of routine changes in that classroom. If you've got to change so many things to keep him in that room, that is not the best fit for that child. So you're kind of looking, of course, at least restrictive environment, LRE, okay, but we're also looking at how can we keep education going for everybody, and sometimes that's not the option. This is interesting. Most disabilities don't affect what a child learns, but how they learn. And if we can get focused on how a student learns, and that comes from a lot of that information that you're getting from that testing, the Woodcock-Johnson and the WISC, okay, you're getting that information, and now you know how their brain works. Now you can formulate the best plan for how they're learning in your school. These are two of my kiddos, they're brothers. And they both come over to the Learning Center for different things. If you're a teacher, how many of you are SPED teachers? That's quite a few of you. Okay, if you're a teacher, here are my tips for you. Include everybody. Give everybody a job. Everybody needs to feel important and valuable. I don't care what their cognitive ability is. Give them a responsibility. Find your allies. You have teachers in your school. I had 2 text me today, and I had another 4 text me yesterday, and they said, hey, we know you're tired. We're praying for you. So I've got this prayer support going behind me. But find your allies, people who understand the importance of what your ministry is trying to do. Provide choices whenever you can. This was a hard one for me with kiddos, and I get it, but I was raised in the you do what I say when I say it philosophy, and I think that's good. The Bible says children obey your parents. I get that. But for some of our kids that get fixated on something, if we can provide choices, we eliminate a whole lot of that struggle and that headbutting that happens. And usually my choices are 2 things I want them to do anyway. You can do this, which I want you to do, or you can do this, which I want you to do. Just pick which order I want you to do them in. So give choices. Partner with the parents. I don't have parents that I feel like are my enemies. Some of them even text me and tell me, so-and-so had a horrible night last night, maybe whether it's through your school messaging system or whatever, but get the heads up, get them involved so that they know what's going on. We can't be an island like, the Learning Center is my kingdom, you are not allowed in. We can't have that philosophy. We've got to partner with our therapists, with our parents, with our teachers. It's going to be a group effort. Don't take behavior personally. How many of you have been kicked, hit, bit, anything? Yes, my hand is up, okay. Sometimes it's harder than others, and when that child is acting so ugly, most of the time it has very little to do with me at all. Most of the time it has to do with something that's going on internally, medication change, whatever, okay? So how do we show grace and love to that child the next time we see them? And how do we not get to the point that when we see them coming, we're like, oh, school would be so much better if you were not in my class. How do we keep ourselves from going there? Don't take it personally. It's not about you. And you are choosing to be a vessel to show that child Christ's unconditional love. It's very hard to be mad at a student if I know my role is to show unconditional love. Make learning fun and engaging. If you're not having fun, they're not either. So sometimes we take a bubble break. We go outside and blow bubbles, or a chalk break, or whatever. Sometimes I can just read the room. We've learned too much. We're done. Everybody's finished. So when you get to that point, mix it up. And then get plenty of sleep. Sometimes as teachers, we do ourselves the harm of not getting rested. My husband will tell you by like 8 o'clock, I'm pretty much done. And it doesn't mean I won't do anything else. It means my brain has to shut off school, or I will not sleep that night, because I'm always trying to solve everybody's problems and what can I do better for that child and what could I buy to help this child. And I have to turn it off. So let your body rest and pray for wisdom. I remember Dr. McCormick told me, he said, Krista, you can read as many books as you want, and you can have a shelf full of them, and I do. He said, but the Lord is the great physician and the great teacher. And he made that child, and he knows exactly what is going on in their brain. He knows exactly what's going on in their body. He knows what they need. So if you get stuck, stop and pray. And can I tell you that I'll do that, not as often as I should, but a lot. I've tried to teach this concept. The child is not getting it. And I'm like, whoa, why can't we get this? And I'll stop and say, okay, Lord, show me what to do. And often it is the silliest thing. Like, where did I even get that idea? And it works, and they've got it forever. So pray for wisdom for that child. All right, if you're an administrator, I'm going to move fast because I'm running out of time. Review report cards, review those achievement tests. This is a great way to start if you don't know who to include in your program. Sarah touched on that already. Talk to the teachers about who's struggling. This is the way we start. When we go into a school, this is one of the first things that I do. I pull all the achievement testing for whatever grades we're looking at, pull all their report cards, and you can see patterns. Review their existing IEP and 504 plans. Know what they already should be getting. They may not be getting it, but know what they should be getting. Then get a draft together of things your school can do. Your school can't offer everything at the beginning, but what can you offer? And be able to put that on paper. These are things we can do. And then ask yourself, have we identified enough students to warrant a program? And if you've found one or two, you probably do, How are we going to tell those parents, you can still come to school, and we know we could help you, but we just don't want to, What are we going to say to them? And then assign a classroom space. You have to have a place to start. Kelly and I were laughing back there because I think we both started in a closet. Sarah said something about a closet. How many of you started in a closet? I've got lots of hands, And I'm thankful for closets. My first closet had no windows, but it was great. We had the door. You can see when I came to Cleveland, I got a room with a bathroom and windows. I was like, the Lord has smiled on my face. This is great. All right, so classroom space. And then determine what you're going to charge, determine paperwork. I am encouraging you not to overcharge. And here's why I am encouraging you with that. These parents already put out a lot of extra money for a lot of extra things to help these kids. So we view it as a ministry of our school and of our church, and everywhere can't do that, and I get it. But think about the cost involved, because it's a lot just raising a child with special needs. And then you have to talk to parents. You can't throw a child in a program unless you have the parents' permission. So make sure that you're talking to them. Step out in faith. It is scary. Starting it is scary. And in your head, you're always like, what if I fail? What if this doesn't work? Guess what? You'll still live, It'll be okay. What if it does work? What if you're able to help these families and offer them hope that they don't get anywhere else? What if you remove the barriers and that child accepts Christ as his Savior? What if their grandparents and their parents can be faithfully attending church and they get saved? We had a grandma attend Vacation Bible School with her disabled grandchild, and because we had a program, a class where he could go, where there was a trained teacher, she sat and listened to the sermon, and she accepted Christ as her Savior at Vacation Bible School. There's so many opportunities there, so don't be scared to step out. Who should work in this program? Well, whoever directs your program should probably have a master's in special education. Otherwise, you're going to make some calls that are very well-intentioned, and they're going to hurt a lot of people. So whoever it is should have the training. Some of the duties of a director, the jobs, would be they oversee resource teachers and assistants. They plan the programs. They talk to the gen ed teachers and parents and the therapists and the people at the public school. They give tests over there. They teach classes when necessary. They do staff development presentations, and they attend those important meetings, the IEP meetings and the 504 meetings. So if you were to walk into this and you did not have a background in special ed, that would seem extremely overwhelming. So make sure that your director is trained in what they're doing. And then I'm going to hit on this, and I'm just going to show it to you. You've got it in your handout, so I'm not going to stay here long. But most of the time, we have to make changes to curriculum. The curriculum that we use is great. It's great. But it doesn't work for some of these kids. And so we have to have alternatives. And I think this was one of the things that was the hardest for me when we first started. Like, what do I try? And how do I ask the parents to spend the money on this curriculum if I don't know if it's good, What if I get into it and I hate it 2 weeks in and they don't learn? And so you might have to make some changes. And you could just take the gen ed curriculum and just cut it down. These are the 10 most important terms. That's what we're doing. Or you could give directions on how that student's going to take the test. Maybe they're going to take it orally, or all the questions have to be changed to multiple choice or whatever. You could make some changes like that. But you have to determine where that student is placed and how you're going to monitor their progress, because you need to see that they are learning. You can adjust the rate of instruction, how much material, how fast. Maybe you can't cover it as quickly as the gen ed class does. So here are some things that we do where I am in Cleveland. We make sure that whatever gen ed curriculum is being used, I have a copy of it in the Learning Center. That stops me from having to run back and forth to the gen ed teacher and say, okay, page 72, number 5, what was the answer there? Because I don't have time to work it out in my head. So I keep a copy over there. We evaluate them to choose the best kind of curriculum. Maybe it's a student with autism and they can't do all the colors and pictures and everything. And then we remember that even though they might start in the same class, they might learn at different paces, and that's okay. So we have to be able to differentiate to the kids that are there. I'm going to throw up some pictures of some different curriculum that we have used and found to be successful. And there are more than this that we've added to our list already, okay? These are some curriculums for math. My kiddos love Math UC. It is very manipulative based, and every student I have had IQ's very low, okay? They have all been successful so far with this curriculum. Another one's hands-on equations. Different reading curriculum that we've used. We've got the Wilson Reading System, Bob's Books. We've done a lot for kids with autism. We've got Spire curriculum in there. For spelling, we've done Explode the Code. We've done Mega Words for middle school and high school students. Bob Jones Spelling is actually Orton Gillingham based, and it has different rules that go with each lesson. We would not give this many spelling words to most of our kids, but we can make some cuts there because they follow the rules, so that's an option. Spelling UC, Vocabulary Spelling City, you can actually put their words into that program. They can play games and different things. Actually, a lot of the Abeka Spelling List words are already in there, and the Bob Jones List words, so you can search those. And then sequential spelling is one that we found this year that's pretty interesting. Handwriting without tears. And a reason for handwriting. For my kids that have very limited fine motor skills, a reason for handwriting is great. And I'll show you in a minute some things that we do with that. And then the ultimate handwriting practice, that's another great one. For grammar class, we've done Shirley Grammar, Easy Grammar Plus, Master Books. Those might be other options that there's just not so much on a page. I've put examples of pages underneath so you can just see the difference probably between your gen ed curriculum and what we're moving them over to in the Learning Center. And then for kids that we're trying to catch up, maybe they failed a class, but we need to get them those credits back. Sometimes we'll throw them in a PACE or we'll use a landmark curriculum, but I'm going to tell you right now, those will not work with students with a reading disability at all, okay? It's very stressful, so you have to know your student. And then life packs on there. Some support curriculum that we do just for checking to see if a child, progress monitoring, okay, would be Khan Academy, Moby Max, IXL. There's other websites like that, but know what's free and what's available. Our school actually won school-wide Moby Max for every student last year. So enter those kinds of drawings and things. Quizlet, I think you have to pay now to use that. UFLI just came out with a literacy, it's a reading program, and it echoes a lot of what Wilson does, but it's $70 as opposed to the Wilson, which is like $800 to $1,000 to start. So that's a great site to check out. And then Intervention Central, this is for behavioral and academic. It basically just gives you things to try for different areas where a student might struggle. And then if you've got a kid that they lose so much during the summer, this could be for any kid. Bob Jones has got a book out, and you don't have to choose the level that they're on. You could back it down, okay? But they have a review book, basically, and it reviews math and English and reading. And you could just hand it to the parents, and it's supposed to take 15 minutes a day to do whatever it is for them. So it's not unattainable, but you might even tell parents, hey, maybe the kid's in 5th grade, they've got the 3rd grade book and they can cut it down if they have to, but just so that the kids are reviewing, that's an option. All right, there's a lot of other great resources out there. I have put books down front if you want to grab some and just take pictures. I've got 1 minute. I'm going to hold this book up. If you are starting a program, this is a must for you, okay? If I were to give you any advice that I really would love for you to take, it's this book right here. It has a CD in the back. The forms are probably a little bit dated as far as like the style of it, but you can make changes to any of the forms. But it is basically a how to start a program book, and this was a lifeline for me when I first started. And then this book right here is Planning and Writing and Implementing IEPs from a Christian Perspective. And this just walks you through step by step on all of the paperwork and what would be involved in creating IEPs or 504 plans for your school. For our school, we call it an individualized student plan, and then our 504 plan is called a health and disability plan. And our public school, we've had them look over it. They are excited at what that paperwork looks like and how we can use that between our different organizations. All right, I think that's it. Thank you so much for listening.